Great. Thank you, Professor. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So, yeah, I am looking to share a bit of information with the group. And ideally, this will be kind of two-way because I'm looking for some feedback on the three elements that I'm going to walk through today. Um, in terms of the, real big picture, the lay of the land of everything that's going on. That's not what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to try to be a little comprehensive about what we know is out there for vendors or whatnot. I'm looking for some input there, but these are just a couple key items that I'm associated with, that I'm aware of, that I want to share out. And like I said, I'm looking for, especially from folks that I don't interact with a lot, a bit of input on a couple of things. So going to talk through a little of the work that we've been doing over the last year through the TRB Committee on Highway Travel Monitoring. This is real like base year focus, so not modeling. That's the purview of that committee. We'll walk through a little of what the e-circular was, and then landing on some of the big data related research ideas that are coming out of that. Want to walk through and show to this group who's probably seen it before the third-party data provider matrix, and get some input there. And then I'm going to end on some work that the unit here at ODOT that I work with, the research unit, is finishing up, and talk a little bit about how that does connect with the goal of monitoring pedestrians, and then also connecting with big data through the kind of traditional way that we're thinking with like probe sources and whatnot. So the Highway Travel Monitoring Committee at TRB, I led an effort this year that's finishing up. We're putting the final touches on an e-circular that will be 11 chapters long. Each chapter focuses on a different element of highway travel monitoring. Short duration counts, travel times is in there. Thanks, Sam, for your help with that chapter. There's some stuff in there about probe data, bike ped, and e-scooters, or a micromobility has its own chapter as opposed to a standalone e-circular this year, which I think highlights the increasing seriousness at which those modes are being taken in the transportation realm generally. And the idea with these this particular e-circular is just to lay out the state of the practice, state of the art, and some of the emerging trends within each of these chapters, to help set a course for the committee to in terms of a research agenda for the next 5 years. And so the piece that I'd like to share out with this group and get a little feedback is around the research concepts that came from the probe data for volume estimation chapter, where we, as a chapter group, came up with these three research ideas. And the first one, there's been evaluations of these third-party data products like Streetlight and INRIX. We've done a couple in-house. There's a really great pooled fund that evaluated Streetlight data. But those products are already changing. They're almost changing every year. And so now it's this research concept, the first one, understanding data quality across geographies, populations, time, and data, changing data inputs, is about like doing a little bit more of that, understanding how air and other data quality measures change across time, different disaggregate temporal spans across years, to basically provide information for folks who are looking to purchase these types of products around what they can expect for data quality. The other research concept is related to creation of like a third-party data evaluation clearinghouse. So the idea here is that you would have kind of a one-stop shop to know for a various data product if evaluations have been done, and what those data evaluations, those data quality evaluations have shown. This is a little bit like if folks who do safety analysis are familiar with the crash modification factor data clearinghouse that Federal Highways runs. And this is like a compilation of all the studies about lane widths and like what that does for safety performance. And that they have a rating system within that for each of the studies. So you can kind of go in there and quickly search, like, for a given roadway or intersection treatment, like what is the quality of evidence for crash reduction potential. And so the idea would be similar, that we would have something like that for these data quality assessments for third-party data products. And then the last one is around looking into the technical and fiscal feasibility of developing some of these big data fusion models of our own. We actually have a research proposal going through the ODOT Research cycle right now that's very similar to this. And the concept here is just generally like these third-party providers. We can purchase their products. There's a lot of challenges. We have to go through those earlier kind of proposals that I mentioned here of like evaluating them, but then things change. We don't really know how. I know we've dealt with this with the speed data to a certain extent. And so the concept here is like, is it feasible for state DOTs or a consortium of state DOTs and other transportation authorities to build one of these themselves? And is that a good, is that fiscally reasonable compared to like what the cost is of these products off the shelf? And like, what does that look like, especially in state DOT budget situation that is increasingly constrained? But I'm curious for the group here, like what kinds of questions that you've had generally, maybe they don't fit into something that's like a research idea that would go into the eCircular, but what are some of the ideas around or questions you've had around probe data for volume estimations, not so much that travel time question, I think that's separate, but for travel monitoring, and maybe not necessarily in the forecasting realm, but for sort of understanding the base year conditions that you've all faced. And I would be interested to know that because I think it's helpful for this TRB committee to kind of be aware of some of that. So maybe put some of those questions in the chat, and that way they're sort of documented, and we can even maybe at the end here go through a couple of them. So moving on, let's see. So one of the other things that we've been trying to keep a handle on are the sort of like environment of these third-party data products. This third-party data transportation data matrix was first created by Joe Broach and some others. I've been trying to keep it up to date for the Organ Modeling Steering Committee effort that I'm sort of assigned. And I hope folks can read this okay. What I'm looking for here is two things, just to sort of like, for folks who aren't as familiar, like, there's a pretty big ecosystem of these providers out there, and it makes it hard, in my opinion, as a transportation authority to keep on top of them all. What data they use, what are their methods, what capabilities do they have and functionality? Because it seems like I'm getting, you get emails and you're seeing things in the news all the time, talking about these types of products. And so we're trying to have some basic level of summary about them. And so I would ask the folks attending today to take a look at this. And if there was some on here that I'm missing, let me know, because it's been increasingly difficult to stay on top of the landscape for these products. And so similarly, putting that in the chat would be really helpful. Let's see. And then the last thing I wanted to make this group aware of is some work that we're finishing. The research team at Portland State and Utah State University are finishing up. Sarisha Katuri at Portland State and Patrick Singleton at Utah State were the PIs on this project, where they looked at the relationship between the push buttons collected from our traffic signals and the relationship with actual pedestrian counts. And there was some work previously done for Utah DOT that found like there's some pretty good relationships here, and with some pretty simplistic factor development, you can turn those push buttons into actual counts or something pretty close to counts. And so we had them repeat that work, and it was pretty good. It was, in fact, very similar to the Utah models that were developed when they compared these two data sets. And whoops, we even actually applied the Utah models to Oregon data and Oregon models to the Utah data, and there's very similar outcomes, suggesting that there's pretty good temporal stability about these models and even spatial transferability. And so we're moving forward with some data integration and some data use. And the reason I think this is big data related is because the signals data is in fact very big, and the state data center has been unhappy with ODOT and the amount of data that we are trying to stuff from our signals into some of the databases that they manage for us. So we've had to come up with some aggregation things to get around that. But the thing I see that's even more important to connecting to big data is the way that we'll ultimately use these types of data, which essentially, once we factor the push buttons, turn into quasi permanent counters, which just for in terms of sheer numbers, ODOT manages about 800 signals that collect the push buttons, and we're talking with partners in the Portland metro region about getting their data, City of Portland, Washington County, and should have almost double that count of 800 just in the Portland metro region, not to mention the other local agencies around the state that, if they had interest, could contribute data. So we'd have a significant number of these infrastructures, providing data, and them on their own would give us some information about volumes for PEDs at the intersections. But ideally, we could merge those with other sources from either Strava or streetlight data or other third-party providers to then allow for estimating out volume estimates across the network or at places, on arterials at the very least. And so that's a little of the connection I see. I have a link here that I can share that is summarizing what we have for ODOT data with these models applied for the ODOT signals, and a really cool data visualization that Sean Strasser built. Sean Strasser is a signals staff person here at ODOT and done some cool work with integrating some of this research. We're hoping that there's a path forward to getting these data put into something like PSU's bike ped portal. And so we're kind of working through what the details would look like for that. That would allow us to integrate other agencies' data and maybe provide a couple different ways of visualizing and providing access to these types of data. So that's kind of the three bits that I wanted to walk through today. I'm curious if folks have ideas for research that we should be thinking about on the national or local, here in Oregon level. What kind of data products we should be including in that list of third-party data providers. And then if you have any questions about the push button related research. And I'll put these resources in the chat just so you can start poking at some of the bits here that I'm trying to share. Sarisha did a really great presentation at Portland State University's Friday seminar on the push button work. So if you want to follow up with that, there's a lot of good information there.
Right. Good point. I don't have the link right now. Can probably add to the to OMAG page for this presentation. So there is a couple of comments, questions from the audience. Sylvian point out flowlabs.ai. Yeah, that's great. Something I am not aware of myself either. So
okay, yeah, I'll definitely add that if it looks like it's like within what we're tracking here. It does look, and what a fun name.
This is Sylvan Hoover. That was one that actually Sean Strasser mentioned to me. So, and he might have more familiarity about it, but it looked like they were trying to get into GHG and sort of other modeling space.
Great. Thanks, Sylvan. I guess that's my time, but yeah, I'm interested with this group and the OMSC group about what is our course forward with some of these products. I think I don't know how much discussion folks are having in their agencies or at their their firms about these products, but I feel like we should be trying to wrap our arms around it a little bit more and trying to understand things a little bit more. But maybe I'm missing out on some of those conversations that are happening anyhow. But I appreciate the time today with this group, and happy to chat offline too if folks have interest.